Let's party.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Party Loaded Podcast. With what the fuck kind of intro from Adrian? I don't know. Anyway, before we get into that ridiculousness, my name's Luke Rachalik. Welcome to episode 227. We're in August. It's the 5th of August. We finally made it to August. It's awesome. So 8 p.m. Wednesday night. Time to talk some video games. The show has begun. And introducing tonight, the whole full crew. As per usual, we have off to that side, Adrian Cheer. Fuck the directions. I get this wrong every week. Adrian Cheer. Matt, the Game Day Diet, Christian Paulson Brown, they're all here. The gang is here. What were you singing, Adrian? I have no idea what that was.
Yeah, I'm curious now. It sounds really, really snazzy. I want to listen
to it. Christian introduced me to TikTok a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, just in time.
I do quite love TikTok. Like it's surprisingly dank, like far danker than I ever imagined. I thought it was all just dancing videos because my wife uses it for that. But it turns out it's the Zoomer generation's internet. Like it is where memes live for Generation Z.
Yeah.
So it's fantastic for that. Plus, I've subscribed to tons of turtle channels where people feed tortoises, so I love that. But there's a trending little soundbite tune at the moment called Mi Pan, and it's just this random nonsense tune that is extremely catchy, and it's going sort of viral. Or by the time this goes out, it will be over. But
most of the TikToks I've seen of that are people bagging on it for being lame and really white bread, though. People being that particular meme, a lot of jokes about that meme being shit tired. Yeah.
I'm not surprised. Everything moves so fast, but like I say, the tune has just been ingrained in my brain for the last couple of days, so I can't get it out of my head.
Well, I was just going to say you've got onto TikTok just in time for apparently Trump to shut it down, so that's going to be interesting.
Yes.
He's reversed that already.
Has he?
He doesn't even know what TikTok is.
I can't keep up with this shit anymore. I don't know what's going on. Oh, man. Well, there's something we can keep up with, though, is games, because there hasn't been a huge whirlwind of activity in terms of new releases this last couple of weeks, but we've been sinking some time into some stuff otherwise. But who wants to kick us off tonight? What's been playing this fortnight? Any takers?
I'll go. So lots of Destiny still, which has been actually very good. I found that the four of us have kind of gelled as a unit, which has been quite good over Destiny.
I've spent more time playing games online with you guys this last few weeks than I think ever.
Yeah, it's been, and for that reason, it's been really great. I've talked occasionally in the past about Christian and mine, sad lives before we were part of the Party Load crew, where every few years we'd move in together and play video games and had no one else to play video games with. And now through you guys, we're starting to branch out. At the ripe old age of, our late 50s, we're starting to get into...
Fuck, what does that make me?
We're starting to do what teenagers are doing every day, which is great.
It's strange that, because Destiny has 5 teams of 3, so previously with just the 2 of us, we didn't have enough people, and now there's 4 of us. Now there's too many people, and that's unheard of for Adrian and I. Too many people for a group.
Ironically, though, the one thing it's perfectly suited to, which is Gambit, we haven't actually played together yet. So.
That's true. That's true. Activity. Lots of that. That's been great. We've done a couple of raids. Really enjoying it. I did go on a work trip to Coral Bay last week, so I was away for about 4 nights driving up the coast. So I chucked it on an audiobook, and that was really great. But I took with me Paper Mario Origami King. Origami King.
The Origami King, yep.
The Origami King, yeah. So I took that with me because I have played quite a few of the Paper Mario titles, especially the old ones. So I played Paper Mario on the 64. I played Thousand Year Door, which was the GameCube one. And I think there's one other Paper Mario that I actually played, but I can't remember which one.
Color Splash?
No, it was one of the older ones, I think. I'd never played Color Splash, though I wish I had.
Well, this is all kind of like a build on to the original Super Mario RPG, isn't it? Kind of in the terms of the style.
No, it's actually weird. Branches. Yeah, they are different branches. So the Super Mario Superstar Saga, which originally was on the Game Boy Advanced, and then there's been a few others following that line. So like Bowser's Inside Story. One about dreams. I can't remember what it was called. Where like Luigi falls asleep and you go into his dreams and stuff. I can't remember the name of that one. Yeah. But they're one path, and then Paper Mario is another path. This path is like 1632-bit. This path is everything's made of paper. So it's kind of, and they're like puppets almost, like 2D puppets. They're pretty much exactly the same style of game. The combat's pretty much exactly the same. It's just a little bit different in the art style. But this one's quite cool. And I remember playing a little bit of Sticker Star, and it was really disorientating because in the other Paper Mario games, everything in the art direction of the game looked like it fit in the game, and it was kind of like everything, the art direction was all uniform. In Sticker Star, it was Paper Mario with like stickers of real objects over the top of it, and I just found that really jarring and unusual. And Origami King is sort of dialing it back a little bit more in that direction, where it's kind of Yoshi's Crafted World meets Paper Mario. So you can see in some of the footage, there's like stuff made out of paper, and there's, you interact with the world by like folding things and peeling things and that kind of stuff. So in that regard, it's been very good. And the writing's actually really funny. So I'm quite keen on how clever and funny it is.
That's the one thing I was going to ask about. I've heard amazing things about the writing.
Yeah, it's really good. And I read a really interesting article that was about how the Paper Mario games, for some reason, are no longer allowed to create original characters. So in the older Paper Mario games, there was like a Koopa Troopa character, a Goomba character, a genie, like these random like Mario art style characters, but they were original characters with their own personalities and backstories and whatnot, and they were really cool. For some reason, in the new sort of Paper Mario games moving forward, they're just not allowed to do that anymore, or they're not doing it. So in the previous ones, you used to actually, classic RPG style, gather a party of characters that you could then use and swap out and level up. But in the new one, it's just Mario, basically. There's no like extra characters that are original to that game, so that's an interesting change. But it seems to be offset by the very creative use of its gimmick, which is like paper and origami. So fun. It's been good.
Yeah, the three things that I'd heard about it were exactly what Christian mentioned in terms of the writing being excellent. The second thing I heard was that apparently the economy of gold coins is ridiculous, that you just get so many of them. And the third thing that I heard was that apparently the game length is actually pretty chunky, like it's a good length game.
Oh, okay, so, I'm not too deep into it, but even in the couple of hours that I've already sunk into it, you're absolutely right. Like you get flooded with gold coins, and it's weird because it's not like you're not going to collect them, because they're everywhere. But one of the key mechanics of the exploring is that as you move around the world, there's like holes in the terrain that are like ripped paper or paper mache. And as you go around, as you defeat enemies, as you break objects, you collect confetti, and then you throw that confetti over the missing parts of the world and rebuild it. And every time you do that, it like showers you with coins, and you're doing that like every couple of meters, like through the landscape. So you just get coins and coins and coins and coins, and like you get like literally thousands of coins before you can even buy any items, like before the first shop opens. Yeah, it's crazy. I was like, I've got money burning a hole in my pocket. Anyway, good times. The other game I played it today. I bought it today, played it today, refunded it today. But not for really bad reasons. It's Fall Guys. So made by Devolver Digital. Or produced by Devolver?
Published.
Published by Devolver. It's basically Battle Royale, Takeshi's Castle, like put together. Now I need to explain Takeshi's Castle. Takeshi's Castle is like those shows you see on TV where it's like a bunch of people.
Oh, I have seen Takeshi's Castle. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
it's like Ultimate Ninja, basically.
It's
Ultimate Ninja is like
what's the Splashdown show they do? The American
Wipeout.
That's it. Yeah.
So if you've ever seen any kind of game show where there's like giant like foam logs spinning on a platform and people have to like jump over it, or they have to like run through doors or swing on ropes. It's basically obstacle course and you have to get to the other end.
For the senior citizens like me, it's a knockout.
That's right, yeah. It's that concept plus Battle Royale. So every round there are 60 players and there's, I think, 4 games in total, and each of those games gradually thins down the herd until there's one winner. It was fun, but the game is way too expensive. It's $30, and if I had paid $10, I would have kept it. But $30 is a lot of money to pay for a game that I got bored with after about 20 minutes. And it sounds like it'd be really fun and chaotic and exciting, but in reality, it's actually quite boring because all you're doing is like you're in like a massive group. It is interesting seeing the different kinds of obstacles and courses and things that you have to do, but it's just not that fun actually, like doing it, because so much of it is left to random chance. So you can only do 3 things as your little bean fall guy. You can't run. You have 1 move speed, so you can move, you can jump. Oh no, 4 things: move, jump, dive, and grab. So the diving is interesting because you can use it to like dive over certain obstacles, or like dive over the finish line, or extend a jump by a little bit to just make it onto a ledge. The grab button you can use to grab a ledge and pull yourself up, and that's it. The only other thing you can do is grab other players. So if you've got like one bean guy and you're behind him, you catch up to him, you can grab him and like hold on to him and like slow him down, but he eventually breaks away from you, and it doesn't actually it doesn't do anything because you're just out for yourself. It doesn't really serve any purpose, because unless someone is just about to jump off a ledge and you grab them and like screw up their jump, but while you're doing that, 40 other people have run past you to the finish line. So there's no point in doing that. The only fun I had was like if you make it to the finish line and you're like in the first group of people, instead of running over the finish line, you stand in front of the finish line and grab people as they run past and try to get to the finish line for no other reason than to just stick with them. And they kind of get a bit frantic, or sometimes it happened a couple of times where like you do that and the other person grabs onto you and you just like spin around on the spot while everyone else runs past you.
Just clothesline them,
yeah. So would I recommend it? Yes. Now? No. Wait till it drops in price, because unless you really love that kind of thing.
I think the 2 games you play should be combined into Mario Party Royale.
Yeah. It's basically like Mario Party without any of the surrounding meat. It's just like the games and nothing else. And I think that's what's sort of doesn't give it any legs, is that I predict that this game will be really popular for a couple of weeks, and then like no one will be playing it because it's not very fun or interesting after you've tried it a couple of times. Where it might do really well, obviously, is like in a party atmosphere or with friends.
Or Twitch even. It sounds like Twitch, like streamer based.
Yeah, it's very streamer friendly, and like ironically, I had more fun watching other people after I had crossed the finish line, because you go to spectator mode, and it's quite, you kind of like, yes, go, and you're cheering on that guy, and then you see him like dive and like fall into the abyss. You're like, oh no!
Reminds me a little bit of that concept of spectator marble racing that's happening.
I was just going to mention. I was going to say, have any of you guys seen Marbles on Stream? It's just a game where it's just like every viewer in a Twitch channel can just join and become a marble on like a random obstacle course where like 1,000 marbles just get dropped and just randomly like slide around and get flung around on like an obstacle course, and then the streamer just like follows the leader and does like commentary and stuff.
Cool.
But it's just fun because you can just randomly join and see your name appear above a little marble, and then you can like cheer for your little marble as he goes along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds similar in that regard. Yeah. Like playing it on my own, I was like, pfft. But if you three guys were watching me play, that would change it dramatically.
Yeah.
It would be way more interesting and more fun.
Like, to me, it sounds like it has the battle royale issue. Like, the whole reason I don't enjoy battle royales is because it's like, okay, cool, I played it once and I enjoyed it once, but the next time I play it, it's going to be basically the same thing.
Well, it seems like the difference here is that RNG takes care of a lot of the maybe barrier to entry that a lot of battle royales have, in that you, like, if I was to go and play Fortnite or PUBG now, someone would smirk the piss out of me in terms of skill difference. Like, I just can't compete at the level that a lot of the people who play in those games regularly do. But a game like this, because so much of it goes down to chance, I mean, that's both a pro and a con as far as depending on what you're after. Yeah.
This game would be fantastic for kids. It's extremely friendly and like it's the least violent game you've ever seen. And you can barely enact your agency on other people. Like, you can hardly do anything to anyone else. The one problem it has is that it's almost too much left to chance in some of the games. Like, one of the ones that I ended up having to play quite a few times, it's like if you're looking at a bird's eye view, it's a circular arena divided into 3 parts, and everyone in the group of however many are left get put into one of the teams of 3. So you have like you have blue, red, and yellow, and then there are 7 giant soccer balls on the field, and you basically just have to keep the balls in your zone so that your team has the most balls at the end of the match.
Okay.
But because there's 60 people all running around and these balls are flying everywhere, there's literally no way to engineer it so that you win. It's just completely random and up to chance. Like, there's no way to have any effect on the outcome of it.
You said it's like a stage thing with eliminations, though. Like, does it cut the player pool down over rounds so that you've got like a small number? Yeah. So
it starts with 60, then it usually drops to around 40, then around 27, and then by the end of 4 rounds, there's only like under 10 people left in that final round, and then there's one winner in that last pool of people. So
I imagine you get a little bit less chaotic and a little bit more controlled at that point?
Kind of, but like I never made it to one of the final rounds, but I did spectate one of them once, and the final game was that game you play as a kid where you put like a balloon between your legs and you have to like pop someone else's balloon.
Yeah,
it's kind of like that. Where
Mario Kart.
Yeah, basically. So it was a circular arena with some terrain to it. There were 6 people. One person starts with a raccoon tail, and you basically just have to be the last person with the raccoon tail at the end of the round. Right. But all that means is that all that really matters is the last 5 seconds of the match, not the 3 minutes leading up to it. Because all you need to, that's all that actually matters. It doesn't really matter how long you have the tail for. Yeah. Because if someone steals it off you at the last second, they win. Yeah. And that's kind of indicative of all the matches. Anyway. It was fun. It'd be really fun to watch, but I didn't have a huge amount of fun playing it.
Yeah, so. That's fair enough.
Yep.
Right environment.
I'll go next then. Yeah. So I did manage to pry myself away from Destiny over the last couple of weeks, helped by the fact that I did some house sitting for a couple of nights where I didn't have access to my PC, so I was had to go cold turkey.
But I did not my choice.
Not my choice, no. But I brought my PS4 and I started playing Ghost of Tsushima. And I have been, I'm probably 20 hours in. I haven't actually checked, so...
You've gotten further than me. I just cracked the plastic on this bad boy today.
Okay, yeah. So maybe 20 to 30 hours in. And my thoughts on it are that, as a lot of the reviews would have said, it's very standard open world game-ish. Like, if you've played Horizon Zero Dawn or any of the more recent Assassin's Creed games, or even like GTA in a way, open world map, missions to do, resources to collect, kind of like Far Cry as well, enemy bases that you infiltrate and kill and then reclaim for your side.
I've heard a lot of people compare it to the last 2 Assassin's Creed games.
It is very much like that, yeah, definitely. Which is a good or a bad thing depending on your taste. Like I've come to a bit of a realization where I think those styles of games, there's a crowd of people which kind of groan and say that that's a really tired formula, and I can understand that. But I think that for me, I have to admit I really like those types of games. Like I find them quite relaxing. I like having, just a list of things to do and just ticking things off and like clearing an area on the map of all the side objectives and then moving on to the next thing and like acquiring new skills. And because you do get a lot of like interesting combat skills and exploration skills as well. Like you get a grappling hook and things like that. And it's very chill. Like I'm playing it on hard, but it's still not very challenging. It is very power fantasy-esque where it's not like Sekiro. Like it's much easier than that. And so it's quite relaxing to play. Yeah. It's beautiful. Like it's an absolutely gorgeous game. If you've seen any of the footage, like the environments, it's just the kind of weeb fantasy of medieval Japan cranked up to 11 of just like cherry blossoms and like grassy fields and
there's a lot of like brush strokes and stuff everywhere.
Yeah, lots of brush strokes, lots of like bright red leaves and like
big anime titties.
not quite. It is like the setting it's not fantasy, but it is like heightened realism. So it's
a film
stuff. It's film, yeah. It's it's heavily inspired by like the Akira Kurosawa films, like the classic samurai films from the 50s and 60s. But also like it has some of the sort of Shinto religious aspects to it too, where like there's a lot of like nature spirity type things, but it flirts with being supernatural. Like there's little foxes that will, if you find a fox, then follow him, then he'll lead you to like a little fox shrine that you can get a charm from. And like foxes in real life wouldn't do that, but they do in this game. But then there's no like oni or kappas or anything running around.
So it's very folktale-ish.
Yeah, very folktale-ish in a way.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little about the historical setting of the game because it's set in the like 1270s AD, on the island of Tsushima, which is kind of between Japan and Korea, and it's about the Mongol invasion. So the Mongols invaded twice to Japan, and it's a weird situation where that time in history was actually before a lot of the tropes and kind of characteristically samurai things that like we think of in pop culture, but they've kind of just done a pastiche of everything Japanese and put it all in this setting. And the fact that it is this heightened realism kind of gets away with it a little bit. But like for example, the katana, like the style of sword at that time period, they were using like tachis, which are like longer, bigger swords. They weren't using those katanas. They didn't have the katana and the tanto that would be worn under the belt. They didn't have that. Like in the game, you can find spots that you meditate and do like a haiku, and you pick random things in the environment to create like a haiku with. But haiku didn't exist for 300 years. Like the whole like Bushido code didn't exist. So there's a lot of things like that where they've taken sort of 1600s, 1500s samurai. Like the most samurai things that you'll see are set in the like Sengoku period, which is like the Japanese Civil War period. They've taken everything from that setting and transported it sort of 400 years in the past.
Yeah. Some liberties for the sake of inclusiveness of fun concepts. Yeah.
Yeah, but I find it interesting to talk about. Like I'm a history nerd and a politics nerd and that sort of thing. And I wanted to talk about the perception of samurai as these kind of almost Eastern equivalent of like a knight. Knights have Western knights have like the chivalric code, and they were kind of romanticized for a couple of hundred years after they ceased to be as like protectors of the innocent. And samurai have a sort of similar thing where they follow this code of honor, and they like, they're supposed to be upstanding, when in reality they were like the military branch of the feudal overlords. Like they weren't there to look out for the people. They were there to look out for their their lords, and they didn't give a shit about peasants. I'm sure there was some nice
Who does?
but generally, like it was a hierarchical system, and they consider themselves superior to everybody, and so like that romanticized version of samurai has been like, there's some problematic elements in there, I think, of taking something that historically wasn't like accurate, but then taking the sort of Western version of it and transplanting it back into Japan.
So, do you think Ghost of Tsushima should get away with it, or do you think there should be accountability?
No, I think it's fine. Like I don't have a problem with it existing. I think it's a perfectly fine choice. I just think it's interesting to have a conversation about some of the other implications and some of the aspects of the connections to history and connections to Japanese nationalism as well that I think are interesting to talk about. Like in the early 20th century, when Japan was like a totalitarian state that did terrible things in the Pacific to other nations, it was stuff like samurai and the Bushido code and their Shinto religion that they manipulated to like create a national identity of superiority, and some of that has sort of carried past sort of World War II and still exists in the culture. And like, if you took what like people on the far right in Japan love samurai, and they love that image of like the noble samurai. And people in the West, I think, they don't have the percent, like they don't have I'm not saying I'm an expert on this, but I as a fan of history, I know a bit about it.
They don't have the context.
Yeah, they don't have the context for what it means. And to draw it back to knights, it's like if you glorified, say, the Crusades, and you talked about the Crusades as like noble knights off to like save the Holy Land from the heathens, that's kind of where it flirts with that sort of thing a little bit.
Yeah. The main character's name is Jin, isn't it?
It's Jin, yeah.
So do you think that perhaps maybe it's a missed opportunity for them to approach it in a manner where maybe Jin could be used as a way to juxtapose his character of a more sort of noble, heroic version of the samurai to other supporting characters in the game that are not necessarily that, and are a bit more in the traditional sort of realistic sense, kind of not as wholesome in a way?
Yeah, I think that I'm not that far into the main story of the game, so I don't know the direction that it fully goes in, but there is a conflict in there about Jin having to resort to unhonorable tactics like stealth killing and like that sort of stuff that is his, like, the other samurai and his uncle say is like dishonorable and disgraceful, but he's like, I need to do it to save my people. I need to do it to save Tsushima.
Right.
So he's kind of he does compromise the samurai ideals to save the land, but I can't tell, and I don't know where that's going to go. I don't know whether it's trying to tell a story of sticking to strict moral codes is like it can doom you and you need to be flexible, or I don't know whether it's a case of Jin is dooming himself by going down this path, and that he'll become like a kind of Dark Knight-esque figure of like sacrificing his own virtue for his people.
Yeah.
I don't know where it's going to land.
Is the game made by a Japanese studio?
No, it's made by an American studio.
Yeah. Okay.
But they did have a lot of like cultural advisors, and I'm not accusing them of cultural appropriation or anything like that. I think that the game is great. I love everything they've done. The historical inaccuracies don't bother me at all. I just find it interesting to talk about. I think there's conversations that can be had around it.
Yeah.
So how do we go about cancelling
Sucker Punch?
How do we make a plan, starting right here, grassroots style?
So Adrian, just for a bit of context, Sucker Punch, the studio that developed it, is also the makers of the Infamous games. If you're familiar with those, yep.
Yeah, you say Sucker Punch, and I'm like, that sounds familiar, but yeah, Infamous.
Yeah.
It's so funny that you were talking about the open world paradigm. And like that style of game. As you were saying that, in my mind, I was like, it'd be cool if there was like a superhero game like that. And it's so funny that it's made by Sucker Punch, who made Infamous.
Yeah.
Which to this day still is the video game that I've played with the best ice powers yet.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Infamous 2. Best ice powers to date yet in a video game.
Yeah. We'll see how that sits in November this year.
Definitely. I also wanted to say I'm very disappointed that I applaud them for including a Japanese voice track in the game, but they didn't lip sync it correctly at all. So the lip flaps are done for the English, and I tried to ignore it. I tried to play in the Japanese, but it's really distracting. And also, as I've experienced with some other games, it does cause a problem with, like, they haven't subtitled some incidental dialogue. So, like, if a random NPC says something off in the background, or even, like, when you select certain upgrades, Jin will have, like, a piece of dialogue, like, you unlock smoke bombs, and he says, like, oh, yes, I'll be able to use this to avoid my enemies. But, like, that's not subtitled. So the inconsistency there as well is a bit off-putting. So I'm just playing it in English.
Is this what? Yeah, I was going to say, is this one of those rare cases where you probably would want to play in English for those reasons? Yeah. Interesting. No, that's good to know going in.
You might, side topic, Christian, you might be interested. I've just started one of my new university units, which is called Asia from Colonial to Modern Times.
Okay.
And it's all about the kind of stuff that you really love.
Yeah.
Like the first lecture was like touching on the opium wars and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't realize what I was getting into when I signed up for this unit, but it turns out it's like basically a history unit. So
awesome.
What you're getting into is a lot of fucking conversations with Christian. Well, I might jump in next because what I'm going to talk about is going to kind of dovetail into Matt's stuff as well. So as with everybody else, a lot of Destiny this last fortnight. I have ticked off 2 more of my seals for my 11 seal pledge of this season. So yeah, exactly.
They're very angry.
I love kicking seals.
I love kicking these seals too. They're good. I'm gonna make hubcaps out of these sons of bitches. So yeah, that's going well. But the rest of my week has been pretty much Persona 4 Golden, which I'm closing in on the final parts of at the moment. So I should be able to talk a bit more about that next time. Really enjoying where the story's finally going after a lot of fucking low spots in that game. I think the pacing has been all over the place. But I'll talk about that later. But yeah, apart from that, played a bunch of Necrobarista. So we talked about it last week, of course. Our friends from Route 59 Games over at the East Coast, or spread across Australia, I guess, and outside of Australia, from what I understand as well. So they put out their new cinematic visual novel game based on a necromancer that runs a coffee shop and sort of the setting of that world and all that it entails. And I've been enjoying the shit out of that. So Matt and I streamed a bunch of it last week on Wednesday night. I think we got a good 2 hours in, which ironically only took us up to the opening credits. So
yeah,
which I don't think is representative of a prologue. I think it was actually quite a long chunk of content.
Yeah. It's basically the first quarter of the game, and then the credits roll. Like if we weren't streaming it, we probably would have gotten through that part in I reckon like an hour,
totally,
an hour and a half.
We did slow things down because we were doing all of the voice parts live. So yeah,
which was good fun.
It's good, yeah. But yeah, no, I've been enjoying it a lot. It's I mean, we'll definitely talk about it during tonight's main topic, but it's certainly softened my attitude towards visual novel games quite a bit, having gone through this one, because I think it does a lot of things right that I would normally criticize in the genre. And the characters, I think, thrive from it. Like it does a really good job of extra sort of content to build out the world that these characters exist in, so that not everything needs to be delivered strictly through the dialogue. Because I think that games that focus too much on trying to do that, it seems like, sometimes they leave no stones unturned to the extent that the conversations feel a bit unnatural because things come up that you don't think should, just for the sake of exposition. And it's one thing I really hate in games like that. But they do a fantastic job of it. I think that it feels very natural. A lot of Australianisms in there. There's a lot of Aussie slang, which, they do a decent job of explaining for anyone who's not part of our national audience. Like, there's one part where a character offers another character a smoke and literally says, "You want a durry, mate?" And anyone who's not an Australian would not know what the fuck that means, but they actually go on to sort of, say what it is. So that is the sort of thing they do to bridge the gap, which is good. But holy shit, it's a gorgeous game. The artwork in this thing is phenomenal. I love the art style, the color palette and everything, the bright spots on screen that are designed to draw your eye to particular interactions and characters. I'll throw some visuals up now while Matt talks, because obviously he's been playing it too. But I'm a big fan of the look of this game. I think it's phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous game. I love the way I had a little mini rant on Twitter where I was talking about the fact that, like, for as a games producer, like, I can see all the ways that they've kind of embraced the limitations of their small team, by the game has very limited animations. Like, wherever they use animations is like punctuating a scene, and like the freeze frame stuff feels really good. Like, it actually makes it feel like a visual novel. Like, it actually makes it feel like you're kind of flipping through the dialogue, like you're reading through a part after part and kind of going along with the narrative. And yeah, like they do a lot of really cool stuff about like exploring the narrative. So each sequence of events, you're collecting keywords, because like whichever character you kind of are playing, whoever they are, they've lost their memory, and the stuff that's happened at this place called the Terminal is somehow relevant to your character, and so you're trying to recall what's happened. And so during each sequence of events, at the end of it, you get to select a couple of keywords that popped up during that sequence of events that are somehow relevant to your character.
Is it 7 each time? I think it's about the same usually.
No, it's 7 each time, but the amount of words they give you varies a lot.
True,
so you have to pick the 7 from like potentially up to 20 or 30. Like there was one chapter I did where it had at least something like 25 words, and then you could only pick 7 of them. And each of those words kind of unfolds into a specific keyword that you can actually then use quite literally as a key to unlock different stories, essentially, in the world. And those are literally just like written little narrative thing about an event that took place, essentially. And they're great. Like, they're actually really, really good reading. They're immensely funny. Some of them are quite sad or insightful. And that's just the game as a whole, really. Like, its whole mood.
We got to talk about the
cracking jokes.
We got to talk about the Lamington recipe.
The fucking Lamington recipe, so good. Yeah. So because it's this world where magic is a big thing. They have there's a Lamington recipe in the game.
It's one of the unlockable things.
It's one of the ones you can unlock through getting those keywords. And so this recipe is like, because the world's so magical, like it's like a standard Lamington recipe. I forget what it's called, but it's like a standard Lamington recipe. And you open it up and it starts to get really weird really fast. Like, they're talking about how, you need a deceased Lamington, but it needs to have the genetics of a Lamington, but it can't be like this fake descendant of a Lamington. It has to be actually a descendant of this certain genealogy of Lamington, which is really weird. And like, you're reading the whole thing, it's like, oh, this is just bizarre. And then on the very last page, it's like gluten-free option. And it's talking about the fact that, you actually require a Lamington to stir in the self-raising flour and yada, yada, yada.
The way I read it was almost like you were required to make a Lamington golem in order to actually make the food version of the Lamingtons. This is like, what the fuck? Yeah.
And there's just generally like weird, but it ends on this note that actually had me laugh out loud. It was actually quite funny. I won't ruin the punchline. But yeah, like a lot of the little narrative things that you can kind of unlock in the game are very much like that, where they're quite funny. Like there's one that I was reading, right? I can't remember. No, it was bay leaf. Like there's a comment in there that's something like, just don't let the bay leaf into your soul and you'll be fine. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, the way they're talking about this thing is like, apparently in our real world, certain things have magical aspects that we just don't understand. And the game kind of like dabbles in those things a little bit. But yeah, no, the writing is incredibly good. The visuals are gorgeous. Like, it's not just the visuals, but the cinematography of the visuals. Like, even though it's like freeze frames, you can see like every single moment has been like really kind of deeply thought about to frame it in a very specific way that has a lot of meaning just in the framing.
There's quite a lot of movement for the
love.
type of game that it is, which is surprising.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, I 100% recommend it. I've finished it. The ending is an emotional roller coaster, which I fucking loved. Like at one moment, it's like I'm bawling my eyes out because it's freaking sad. And the next moment, it's cracking dad jokes, which I both cringed and laughed at. It was really, really good. Very, very much recommend it.
Yeah. How long did you think your playthrough took?
4 hours.
4 hours. Mine's currently at 14, but I think that's because I was really tired the other night when I was playing and I fell asleep on my keyboard. So it's not indicative of the game quality at all. I was just wiped. So I had to go back and make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah.
Yep. But yeah, otherwise, for myself, I put a little bit more time in with Dragon Quest Builders 2, which I'll only mention briefly. I thought that the island that I was on was basically the game, and then it turned out that I'm like 20 hours in, and then it's like, yeah, you get to leave this island now, and you're returning to this starting island. And I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. And so it turns out there's like several different islands you have to go out and actually build up communities and everything. Which that game's a beast if that's the case. Like I think I'm like 30 or 40 hours in, and I don't feel like I've scratched the surface of it yet.
Wow.
So yeah, but it's quite fun just to kind of sit down and relax with. I've quite enjoyed it as like an unwind game. And the other thing I wanted to briefly mention, I got to play. I've been playing Destiny 2, obviously. But then with Christian and Adrian last night, we did Prophecy.
Yay.
Which is the first time I've actually done Prophecy. And holy fuck, that dungeon is amazing.
It's cool. Hey?
No competition, my favorite dungeon of the game. Like, just gorgeous. And the last fight, I quite enjoyed, despite the difficulties we had with the fact that I was underleveled for it. But yeah, no, great fun, really good. We got there, yeah.
Yeah.
We did it in the end.
That's it.
And funnily enough, our luck changed as soon as Luke left the chat. So
yeah,
I think that's just proves.
It was fucking Luke throwing us, right?
Yeah, notice after we left, we beat it pretty quickly.
Yes, Adrian's pretty good at beating it quickly. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk.
What do you mean, Luke?
I don't know what I mean. Let's talk some gaming news. Matt, let's throw to you first tonight, because probably one of the biggest things that happened in the last couple of weeks was the big Xbox showcase reveal of some key things. So tell us about everything going on in that space at the moment. Yeah,
so a week and a half ago, when E3 was supposed to be on, Xbox did their live stream, basically showing off a whole bunch of games, talking about the new console, things they have planned and everything. And I kind of want to focus on the game announcements they had here, and I'll kind of go through like from the really cool stuff to the stuff I'm probably most excited about. So one of the things they announced is that Destiny 2 Beyond Light is coming to Game Pass. Mm-hmm. But Beyond Light, the trailer was showing off all the wicked ice powers we're going to get, which I know Adrian's mega excited about.
I had a moment the other day where I was watching that trailer over and over and over again, and I was like, is it ice? Like, what? Yeah, because the animation on the ice, it looks so much like crystal, and I was like, they've never called it ice.
No, it's called stasis. They're very carefully.
I know. And nowhere in the game has the word ice been mentioned. And I'm like, could it not be ice? Like, could it be like crystal instead?
And I went, he's not mentioned. Fire's not mentioned.
No, but arc and solar, like
stasis.
Yeah, but arc is like arc is like intrinsic to electricity.
Okay,
solar is hot. But stasis is not necessarily cold.
But the Europa is.
Yeah, I get it. I'm just saying. I'm just hedging my expectations in case.
Adrian's mega like, no, semantics matter here. They fucking matter, okay?
For the record, as a budding linguist, when people say that's semantics, it's not actually semantics. It's something else.
It's space magic ice. Space.
And it's recursion, because it's like, it's not semantics, it's semantics, but that's semantics.
That may not be semantics, but that's pedantics.
That's pedantics. Fantastic.
Anyway, I hope it is ice, but part of me is still worried it won't be.
The one thing that blew my mind about the footage that we saw about those, I'm just going to call them ice powers because that's what I think they're going to be close to.
I'm pretty sure they are.
Yeah, it's like one of them in particular allows you to form crystals horizontally out of walls, giving you different ways to ascend sort of platforms and things. And I looked at that and thought, how is that not going to break the fuck open out of certain areas in this game? Like, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what areas you can kind of cheat your way into compared to before that maybe Bungie haven't anticipated. Well, I'm sure now they'd have to anticipate it, but yeah.
A lot of that content's getting vaulted. So
not Garden of Salvation though. Garden of Salvation breaks wide open if you could do that.
Yes, but you also
Crucible.
Crucible as well. It'll be interesting to see how that gets handled with Crucible. But they do have they have decent kill boxes around. The main thing that I see it doing is those people that do the external map exploration. They're gonna fucking love stasis, right? They're gonna go crazy about that shit because yes, they will break out of maps.
Yeah.
But I don't think that you'll be able to consistently be like, I'm going to hop into Crucible and then go build a stasis pathway around the outside of the map and just escape and snipe people from the exterior. Yeah. I'm pretty sure they'll test the shit out of that. But yeah, I am excited for it. Like it's very clearly there's powers in there about freezing people. I think that's going to be crazy in Crucible because there's not really been crowd control like that in PvP in Destiny, not really. No. So yeah, no, the trailer looked fantastic. The fact that it's coming out on Game Pass, Game Pass just keeps on being like this really fucking good deal. Yeah. There's a whole lot of positives to getting it now.
Did you see that Xbox have just announced the release date for the beta of Project xCloud as well, coming up?
Yes. Yeah.
So I think if anything's going to put the nail into the coffin on Stadia, it's going to be that. It's
But the new Microsoft Flight Sim, there was actually I think there was a trailer for it during the event. I haven't got it in my notes, but
there was.
The way it makes use of xCloud for the gameplay is incredible. And I was watching a report on the visuals for it and how they achieve it. And Microsoft is doing some crazy shit. They're basically, they've got high definition resolution maps of the world, but there's so much of it that it'd be terabytes of data.
Thousands of
to store it on your
petabytes.
Thousands of terabytes. Petabytes, yeah. But they're streaming it. They're streaming it to your PC while you're flying around in Flight Sim. So that they can achieve the level of fidelity that the game has, which is just so cool. I fucking love that. I think that's way more interesting than just, hey, yeah, you can just play your game from a server somewhere. I think that's a much more interesting kind of approach to things.
The only thing from the Microsoft presentation I wanted to talk about was Flight Simulator, because I think it is astounding what they've been able to do. Digital Foundry have done a really good breakdown video on it.
That's what I watched.
They say that not only just the technology behind it, but the end result, the graphical fidelity of the game, they're saying is the absolute best thing they've ever seen. And these are guys who test every game on the highest hardware you can find, and they're saying Flight Simulator is the best looking game they've ever seen, by leaps and bounds.
Wow!
And just the realism of the landscapes and the lighting and weather effects and the cockpits and everything for the planes, they're saying it's just impeccable, that it tricks your brain into thinking it's real at certain points.
So what you're saying, Christian, is you expect when it releases it's just going to fly off the shelves?
I also wanted to, and they have, not only do they have real-time weather systems, so they use weather data to, you can turn on accurate weather data for wherever you are, but they also have real-time air traffic.
Yep.
So every commercial flight in the world, you can toggle on so they're all flying to to the exact meter that they're at, and you can see all that happening. So you can go to JFK Airport and see every plane that's actually coming in and out. If someone is catching an international flight, you can just fly alongside their plane and see the weather that they're experiencing, and I just think it's pretty remarkable.
So in terms of the gameplay experience, I'm anticipating that this is going to be something akin to your American Truck Simulator, where you're flying real life routes, in terms of it being quite chill for the most part.
Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Because I've played old Microsoft flight simulators. I've never really talked about my love of planes, but I do really like planes. And I used to play a bunch of flight simulators, and they were always just, for me, they were just flying over interesting locations. So like you'd fly over the pyramids, you'd fly over New York City, you'd fly over Paris, and you just like see what it looked like. But the highest fidelity I ever saw was like smudgy satellite maps with like a couple of 3D modeled, like the Eiffel Tower would be 3D modeled, but that's about it. Whereas this one is like they've used like algorithms and machine learning to fully 3D model every building in every city, basically. Like,
yep.
It's not all like completely accurate, but they have gone in and like hand done thousands of locations as well. So any like key landmarks and things like that, they've gone in and hand modeled like thousands of key landmarks. But even like forests and riverways and oceans and like they have algorithms to generate beautiful looking like landscapes too. So.
Do you think that this game will be a lot more popular than it would have otherwise been, given that it's pretty much people's only chance of being on a plane anytime fucking soon?
I think that's going to have some effect.
Yeah. It's a weird thing to think
the
about.
fact that it's in Game Pass too, because I think it's a game that a lot of people probably wouldn't have picked up, but when they see it in Game Pass, they might check it out for a fun and
Game Pass, holy shit!
Because I played it.
That service is just insanely good right now. It's
Yeah, because I played Flight Simulator back in the day, and I wasn't planning on buying it, but now it's basically like, I need to play this game. Like, it just looks beautiful. It looks so chill. Just to be able to like fly around and explore. I think that's really exciting.
It sounds a bit plain to me.
Yeah, this segment just took a dive. All right.
I'll go through the other ones rather quickly.
Have you gotten these written down, or you're just going to wing it, Matt? You right?
I'm just going to wing it.
Cool.
I'm going to wing it. Yep. I might crash and burn, but I'll wing it.
All right. I think we're good. I've got them all out of my system now.
All right. So Psychonauts 2 had a trailer where they showed apparently Jack Black's in it, which he had a surprisingly like soulful song. I'm trying to think of the right word here.
I don't know if you saw the same trailer I did, but that trailer to me wasn't a trailer for Psychonauts 2. That trailer was a trailer for what's his name? The game director. Dude.
Yeah, I know the one you mean.
Yeah. Double Fine. Tim Schafer.
Yeah, Tim Schafer.
The whole thing seemed like a trailer for Tim Schafer being friends with Jack Black. That's what it was.
I didn't take that away at all. Like, I didn't think that in the slightest. Like, I was like, okay, it opened up with that. Absolutely. It's like, hey, here's Tim Schafer and Jack Black. And it's like, oh, at first I thought, are they announcing a sequel to that game that they did with Jack Black?
Brutal Legend.
Brutal Legend. Yeah, like Brutal Legend 2. Is that what this is going to be? And I was actually really like excited for a moment. And then it was Psychonauts 2, and I was still excited. But yeah, no, I actually quite enjoyed that trailer. I'm looking forward to Psychonauts 2. There was a announcement for Avowed, which is a new Obsidian RPG, which looks very Pillars of Eternity meets Skyrim, which is fucking cool. So it's basically like a first-person Pillars of Eternity. Stalker 2 got announced, which I'm mega excited for because I fucking love the Stalker games.
I just love stalking.
Just love that's a different thing, Adrian. It's a very different thing.
You can't gamify it though.
Oh God, no! Let's not joke about that. God, no.
Anyway,
there was a Warhammer 40k game announced called Darktide, which is very Left 4 Dead 2 vibes about it.
It looks. I mean, obviously, it's building off the success of Vermintide and Vermintide 2, which was Vermintide 2.
It's got Tide in the name.
Yeah, exactly. Vermintide 2 is an immensely popular game. It seemed like it did pretty well.
They've been shitting out Warhammer games, and Vermintide's pretty much the only good one. So hopefully, this is good too.
True. The setting for this looked very sort of Hive City-esque, though, because for people who are familiar with the 40k games, Necromunda is the tabletop version of sort of like the dense sort of inside the sort of stacks and stacks of urban populace, which literally is like a hive of like billions and billions of people living together in like a techno kind of dystopia.
It's the cyberpunk area of 40k.
Yeah, and using that as a setting for this kind of stuff. Like I've always said that I would love to play a decently done Necromunda game, and I don't necessarily think this is that, but it's probably the closest thing that we're ever going to see to that. So, yeah.
there was a new trailer for the Medium, which we've seen a trailer for before, but this one actually showed gameplay. And basically, like the
John Edwards, the way that was that his name? The fake psychic, TV psychic guy, John
Edwards.
Yeah.
No, you're thinking of the Australian actor, the guy that...
No, I'm thinking of... Remember that there was an old TV show where like...
There was an old TV show.
Crossing over with John Edwards.
Crossing over with John Edwards. Yeah, it'd be like, I'm sensing some blue. Someone had something to do with blue in the audience. And
that was all fake.
God, my grandmother wore a blue dress.
Because people filled out information slips before they went into the studio.
That's right. I thought you were talking about the Simon Baker one, which...
Medium.
Yeah, which is actually called Medium. Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
That's not what this game's about. So the way this game looks, and the way I literally described it in my notes, was basically Silent Hill, but you can go to Silent Hill whenever you want. So like you basically flip back and forth between like this really shitty looking Silent Hill creepy plane, and the real world. And like it looks like it's kind of puzzle solving. Like you need to swap over at some points to progress.
Do you know what I thought that this game actually reminded me a lot of in terms of comparing the Xbox showcase to the PlayStation one we saw for PS5? I actually thought that this game was almost, in a way, stealthily their answer to the Ratchet and Clank trailer that was done on the PlayStation side, purely because it was probably one of the only ones that I think actually showed off the capabilities of a next-generation console in terms of the fact that it's rendering two game worlds in the background, allowing you to seamlessly switch between the two of them in the same way that Ratchet and Clank sort of showed that dimension hopping mechanic, and that kind of showed off the capabilities of next-gen hardware a little bit more. So
maybe. I doubt that was the plan.
Maybe not, but I think they should have highlighted it a lot more, because that was one thing that was distinctly lacking from the rest of the games that they showed off. It didn't really sell anybody on the idea of this is why you need next-gen hardware from Xbox. So I don't think
they're trying to. Yeah, I actually don't think they're trying to. I'm pretty sure at this point they're basically like, hey, yeah, so if you want cheap hardware to actually play, or cheaper hardware to play this stuff on, you get an Xbox One Series X. Otherwise, this will all work on your PC. Like that's the sell here is based like, hey, we're being actually kind of fucking nice about this. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, I wanted to note Crossfire X, which we've seen trailers for before, and it was just fucking stupid. And so we got another trailer now, and it still looks fucking stupid, but it looks so stupid that I'm actually interested. Like the gameplay just looks ridiculous. It looks very Crysis, but written by some like freaking B-movie action director. Like I don't know. I'm actually kind of interested in it.
What's Mila Jovovich's husband's name? Sam Price or something?
Something like that.
Yeah,
John Edwards.
John Edwards. We saw a trailer for Fable. So Fable was actually a rumor running around before the event. We saw a trailer for it. I'm mega excited. It has the humor that I expect from Fable.
They might as well have just shown the logo, as far as I was concerned.
Pretty much. It was only like a teaser, basically. Like they're working on it. And then the final one, Halo Infinite, which is the one that I'm really excited for. I love the art style of it. I know a whole lot of people were shitting on the visuals for it. I think there's a lot of good reasons why the visuals aren't particularly good.
I'm with Matt on this one, actually.
I am too, actually. I like it.
Yeah.
I think was not a big fan.
I think the visual styles are great.
I don't think it looks technically super impressive. Like it doesn't look like Last of Us 2 or anything like that. But I think what they're going for, I like. I like they have very bold colors, clean lines. I kind of compare it to like when you'd play like a PlayStation 2 game that's been upraised into 1080p and 60 frames and everything's really clean. Like it looks better than a PS2 game, but like there's this feeling of it being very crisp and smooth. And they've said that it's going to be 4K 60 FPS, which for an open world game is impressive. So I think that for what they're setting out for, I quite like, but I totally understand why a lot of people, they wanted the next generation Halo game and it's going to blow their socks off with how crazy it's going to look. It's going to be this next gen thing, and it didn't look like that. That's what I feel.
I think that's what they needed to do, honestly. I don't think that Halo has blown the barn doors off anytime recently, and in order for the franchise to still have relevancy, they kind of needed to push a little bit more in that direction. That's my feel. So,
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I actually entirely disagree. I think that visually, Halo fans are going to be like, fuck yes. Because the last 2 Halo games, they were marketed on their, like, look at how fucking great it looks. It's so, like, the fidelity's through the roof. It's fucking amazing. And then it's like, yeah, it looks like fucking Call of Duty. I don't give a shit.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Is the problem is if they push too far in the direction you're describing, Luke, then it looks like every other modern shooter. Yeah. Dialing it back this other direction, like to their roots, they're like re-establishing their visual identity.
Don't get me wrong. I get what
the further they push in that other direction, the more generic it'll look.
All right, let me sort of qualify what I'm saying a bit more. I don't expect it to look modern in terms of every other sort of modern shooter out there, because that's not what I know. A lot of this is going to be the existing audience of Halo fans, and I get that they want something that's a bit more down to the roots of what the franchise is all about, and some of the earlier environments and that kind of stuff too. As someone who, and I appreciate that I'm a very different kind of audience because I don't have the legacy with playing the full lineage of Halo games, and I very much look in as an outsider who loves the shit out of Bungie's other big property and looks at what 343 are doing compared to the early Bungie stuff now and just thinking they're miles apart. But I also think that the game itself, in terms of the first impression it gave me watching the trailer for Halo Infinite, aside from the sort of the environment looking not particularly sort of filled out and very plain and that kind of stuff, the thing that caught me the most when I watched it was the movement. The movement felt really non-dynamic and kind of very underdone. It looked undercooked to me. It looked like a game that wasn't ready to be shown. And that's not me looking at something and sort of saying, hey, I don't think this is Halo enough. This is me looking at it just thinking, I think that Halo looks like, when Halo's done properly, I think it actually does look better than what I'm seeing. So, I don't know. That was my opening impression. And
I didn't see any of that myself. Like, I wasn't looking at it going up, the movement looks clunky or anything like that. But visually, yeah, like I was looking at it, I was like, it looks flat. But I also think that if they were showing that trailer using next generation lighting technology, which they weren't, which was probably the biggest issue with that trailer, was that they should have been showing it using next gen tech, and they weren't. Because all of the textures are using physically based renderers, but they're using last generation's lighting in that trailer, it looks mega flat because that's exactly how they'd look using last generation's tech. So I think that it will look much, much better when it actually has next gen lighting on it. But that's the only issue that I really had with it.
But if that's the case, they should have held off and made it. They should have shown it at a later time. Yeah,
it's the Xbox showcase. Like I don't disagree, but it's also like, what would have happened if they went to E3 and they didn't show Halo?
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that a big company held off on something. And they
needed to show Halo.
They have the luxury of not having to do it all at the same time at the moment because they are going to have future showcases too. So, yeah.
I actually am going to make the argument here that I reckon that the number of people that disliked that trailer are actually not the majority of people. I actually think that most people enjoyed that trailer, and I think there's just a lot of nitpicking. I think there's a lot of nitpicking about it. Like, yeah, it looks flat, right? But people aren't going to give a shit. It's fucking Halo. Like, it looks like Halo. It looks like it plays like Halo. That's what I'm interested in. And also, it doesn't look like fucking Halo 5 or Halo 4. Because I hated the visual style for those. I hated the narrative direction they went. This seems like a return to form, and that's really what I wanted from Halo Infinite. So I'm perfectly happy, basically.
Yeah.
So
I hope to be wowed. I really do. But not that presentation wasn't doing it for me. So I hope that the game does. Yeah.
That's it. That's all the super cool stuff I wanted to point out. Yeah,
that's a bunch of Xbox stuff. So they are committing to another showcase at some point in the next month or so, and they'll have to do another one at some point to actually release price information, I would assume. So
I swear I'm going to be at the register buying my PS5, and they're going to tell me how much it costs there.
Yeah,
you gotta walk up to the counter, and they'll be like, just
they'll have like in an envelope and they have to slide it across. So just
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
You write your counter offer and slap.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'll pivot just quickly into a couple of small news bites for PlayStation on the other side of things. So we're still waiting for the next sort of big chunk of PS5 news. There is a PlayStation State of Play that's going to be airing tomorrow, our time. So August 6th. It's the 5th for us at the moment. So anyone who watches back to this later, it probably will have aired by then. But it's probably a good 24 hours plus away given time zone differences. But they have said that State of Play is going to focus on PlayStation 4 and PSVR games. So we're not going to see a lot of new gen stuff. Well, not any new gen stuff there at all. They have been very careful to set expectations and make sure that people aren't expecting anything PS5 related, especially hardware or pricing news. So they made sure to get out there ahead of that. But a couple of...
Wait, did you say hardware and pricing news?
No.
Sweet. No, I didn't watch it.
That's it. Take what you want out of that text. A couple of other things that have come to light in the last few days, though. A bit of information on PS5 hardware and specifically compatibility with existing PS4 hardware going over to next generation. Interestingly, it seems that just about everything is going to be supported in some way, shape, or form, whether it's your headsets, your Move controllers for the VR, regular PlayStation DualShock 4 controllers and accessories, racing wheels, all that sort of stuff. They're all going to work on PS5, but there is going to be a big limitation in terms of the actual DualShock 4 controllers. So these things, because they don't have the new DualSense technology that PS5 controller will have, these aren't going to be compatible with any of the next generation PS5 games, they've said. Which is in stark contrast to what's happening on the Xbox side of things and has potentially given Xbox a big window to go out, and they've done this, say all of your shit will work on the next-gen consoles. So now I think that for a media sense, that's a big sort of point to sort of, do a big beat-up about. In a practical sense, no one's really going to give a shit because you're going to buy a new console and get new controllers anyway.
Exactly.
So, yeah,
it's them claiming a victory, which is like, yeah, that's technically true, but... I don't think people really care.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just a on paper victory, I think. There will be a small adapter required for the PlayStation camera, from what I understand, to work from PS4 to PS5, so that'll affect any of the VR users. That little adapter apparently is going to be made available from Sony for free for PSVR users, but in terms of how you actually get that, they haven't released any info on that yet. But the thing that surprised me is that we had that attachment to the DualShock 4 controllers that got sold recently, which added that little nub on the back that had the extra trigger buttons. And I was almost sort of thinking that that's kind of going to be the bridge between these controllers and the PS5 ones in terms of maybe there's extra buttons that they needed to account for. But no, it's still going to be the same issue. So it's all of the haptic feedback technology and that kind of stuff that's causing the problem between the two. So but interesting to know nonetheless. But in terms of other big differences between the two console brands, the other one that's come to light this week has actually been relating to the new Marvel's Avengers game that Square Enix are working on. So they've been doing the Avengers War Table presentations, which are kind of like their ongoing sort of drip feed of information about the game as it heads towards its release date in September. I will say that I was really not that interested in this game from the small amount that we played at PAX last year and bits that we've seen sort of between then and now. Like, I had some big reservations about the game. The last War Table that they showed actually got me really interested in it because the gameplay footage they showed and the variety of different environments that you can play in, as well as some of the combat encounters and the enemies and that sort of stuff, I thought it was actually really fucking cool. It was probably one of the best sort of upcoming game presentations that I've seen in a long while. So they did good with what they showed. Whether the game is actually super fun or not remains to be seen. We'll see. I know Christian's got some concerns about the huge amount of detail in some of the item menus and the gear.
And just the ugliness of the UI. Like, it looks visually really ugly to me.
It reminds me a lot of Anthem in that way.
Yeah. My thoughts on it, the Marvel game are... But the Avengers game, it might be good, it might be alright, but now that I'm playing Destiny, I only kind of have one room in my schedule for one kind of lifestyle game, I call them, and that used to be Hearthstone. And while Hearthstone existed, if another really good card game came out, like Legends of Runeterra, I wouldn't play that because my attention is all focused on Hearthstone. And now with Destiny, I'm playing a looter shooter, and if another loot game comes out, I think I'm just going to stick with Destiny now.
Yeah. it would have to be really, really good to get you to consider switching your sunk time over to something else.
Because they have such a commitment involved.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with something like Destiny, you've got years of like developed, refined content.
Yeah.
With this new game, you know it's not going to be good at the start. Like something of that scope is never going to be as good as something like Destiny at the beginning.
Yeah,
it's just common sense that it won't be as good.
And Destiny was the same when it first came out too. Like it took people a while. Yeah.
Give it a couple of years, and then maybe that Avengers game will be good enough to play. But also, who the fuck's going to care about Avengers by that time?
We'll see. I mean, people might be clamoring for Avengers stuff, given that they might not be able to get to the cinemas to get the actual movies.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I don't think people care about that. I don't think coronavirus is having that kind of effect on people's consumption of entertainment.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe
we already do it all from our homes anyway.
It's true. But anyway, the point is that I was getting to with regards to how this fits into Xbox versus PlayStation is that it has come to light that there's actually a bunch of big exclusives that are going to be available to people who play this game on PlayStation only. And the biggest one of which is that you will get to play as Spider-Man. So if you want to play Spider-Man in Marvel's Avengers, you will need to play it on PlayStation for the foreseeable future at least. It hasn't been made clear whether it's a full-stop exclusive or a timed exclusive, given history with especially how Bungie launched Destiny 2 on PlayStation versus Xbox, and some content was exclusive to PlayStation for the first long while. It could be a similar situation to that. Because I think there was a strike. It was the EDZ strike that was exclusive for a while. It was more than a year though. It was like a good long while, and a couple of weapons and things. But and there's some cosmetic stuff that's going to be exclusive for the first month or so. Spider-Man's a pretty big deal though. Like it makes sense given that PlayStation's kind of got that iconic imagery with Spider-Man over the course of the PS4 generation, it being one of their biggest selling and most successful titles. But still, for people who are fans of the Avengers who want to play that game on Xbox, that's gotta suck. Like, that's a big blow.
They're not going to hold back Spider-Man from everyone. Like, he's like the Marvel poster boy. Like, there's no way they're not going to let people play him.
So
I'd be surprised.
For the short term, at least they are.
I mean permanently. They're not
It's usually the nature of these timed exclusive deals too. Like, they're not usually able to say how long the exclusivity lasts for. Like, that's part of the term of the deal.
3 days.
Yeah, well, who knows? So yeah, you just won't know. You'll have to, I guess, just take a punt. But it's kind of weird. Like, PlayStation has had a bit of a rough week in terms of negative consumer attention with things like this, like exclusivity, when Xbox is sort of coming out and saying, we're happy for you to play our games on any platform. You don't even need a console. Play it on PC. Do this. We just want everybody having fun and playing together. But of course, they're just forcing the narrative that suits them at this point in time. So it's always that, you're gonna, when you're the underdog, you can afford to take a few more risks like that. So
I'm looking forward to the Switch exclusive Avenger of Waluigi.
Yes. Fucking finally.
Yeah.
Waluigi.
He wasn't in Smash Brothers, but he'll be in Marvel's Avengers.
But he'll be an assist trophy in Marvel's Avengers.
Do you guys know that Waluigi is uncircumcised?
I did know that.
Yeah.
Did you know canonically that he was hired by Wario because he was tired of not having a brother?
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you know
I'm not even shitting you. He was actually hired from like what's that freaking like really dingy website in the United States where like you can go and like Craigslist. Yeah, it was basically Craigslist. Wario got Waluigi from Craigslist. Fantastic. I'm not even joking. Look it up.
And Waluigi wanted the tax evasion.
Yes,
that's hilarious.
Hey guys, it just occurred to me that Luke is Wario.
I wouldn't say that because then there'd need to be a Mario to compare me to, and I don't think that actually exists at this point in time.
No, I think you can exist alone. The
thing that the comparison I saw during the week, which I thought was hilarious, and I shared it with our group of friends, was Mario is the Steve Irwin to the Joe Exotic Wario. So yeah,
that's perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Anyway, that's Xbox. That's Sony. Let's move on to Nintendo.
Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking of Nintendo secrets, there was a huge giga leak of data from Nintendo servers that has been leaked through 4chan out into the wild. Now, this is like gigabytes of stuff from Nintendo's deep past. So there's lots of game files, source codes, art assets, and all sorts of stuff going back to like Super Nintendo era. There's no confirmed source on where this has all come from, but it is like probably the largest leak of like assets-based stuff to ever come out of Nintendo. Nintendo famously secretive about their past.
They run a tight ship usually.
Yeah, they do. And it is a bit concerning. Like, obviously, as a Nintendo fan, it's interesting to see some of this stuff, but it does feel a little bit like going through people's laundry, like to find some of it, because there was also like correspondence and like emails between employees and stuff that was included in the leak, which is a bit shady. So it's kind of, yeah, there's some ethical dilemmas about it's essentially stolen data.
If you didn't want your emails to be read, you should never have written them in the first place. That's
right, yeah. But some of the stuff that has leaked are things like a confirmed model for Luigi that was at one point developed for Mario 64. So there's for years people have said, is Luigi in the game? Turns out he's not in the game, but they did at least model a Luigi at some point. There's an extra Animal Crossing villager from the original Animal Crossing that's been called Cat 13. There's weird stuff like beta versions of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl that your player character had a dad in them, and like the Pokemon games notoriously never have fathers, but at one point they had one, but then they took it out. There's a whole series of early designs for Yoshi in Super Mario World where he goes through different iterations of like art style, and some of them are like creepy gangly Yoshis, and then like you can see over time he gets fatter, and then his cheeks puff out and his saddle gets bigger, and it's you can see like the evolution of Yoshi.
The one that I saw looked like a squashed frog. It was hilarious.
Yeah, it's a bit weird.
Like Matt. Yeah.
There's stuff like an unused like beach area from Ocarina of Time. There's a bad guy from Super Mario 64. You looking at it now? Adrian? Yeah. You see like gangly Yoshi?
Oh God!
Is that the GIF that cycles through them?
No. I'm just looking at like it. Oh God! Oh my! He looks like a raptor.
Yeah. More like actual dinosaur like.
Yeah.
There's a new bad guy from Super Mario 64 called Motos that people have, like, a lot of these things people have recompiled and actually ported it into ROMs. So like that Ocarina of Time map of this Super Mario 64 bad guy, people have plugged them into ROMs and actually got them working.
Motos was great.
Yeah, it's cool.
Like a ball with stubby little claws.
Yeah. There's one of the interesting things too was like Yoshi's Island seemed to go through a lot of design rehashes, and originally it wasn't even going to be Yoshi's Island. It was a game called Donkey Island, I think it was called. No, Super Donkey. It's called Super Donkey, but it's nothing to do with Donkey Kong, and no donkey in it. I don't know why they are obsessed with the word donkey, but it looked almost like Rayman, like this weird.
It's like weird Donkey Kong himself. Like, well, there's no link to donkey with his name to begin with either.
Yeah. No. So I don't know why Nintendo is obsessed with that word with no relevance to actual donkeys. But yeah, Super Donkey. But again, it looks.
It does look like Rayman.
Yeah,
it does. He's wearing like a pilot's cap, and he has no limbs.
Yeah, so there's just like tons of stuff from like scrapped projects, and there's extra characters from Star Fox 2, like drawings of weird characters that I'm sure furries are gonna love. Like, because I won't get into it. There's a Grandpa Yoshi. There was a sprite made for Grandpa Yoshi in Super Mario World that never got used.
They must have assumed that Grandpa Kong in Donkey Kong Country was something that they should consistently do for other characters. Yeah.
There's a sprite of Luigi flipping you off from Super Mario World that was never used. What else was there? Yeah, just like tons of stuff. And it has been confirmed to all be like true. There was one of the developers who worked on Star Fox 2 actually tweeted like there was one of the actual tools that they used to make Star Fox 2, like a dev tool, was included in it, and he said like, "Oh shit, I haven't seen this in like 30 years." So kind of confirming that it is a real thing. So yeah, like check it out if you want. If you just Google like Nintendo Giga Leak or something like that, you'll find a whole bunch of stuff. You can dig through it. I'm sure there's probably more stuff that's going to come because apparently this has come in 2 waves already. So who knows how much more of it's out there.
Interesting. So whoever's doing the leaking is trying to get as much attention as possible by spacing it out a little bit. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. My only concern is I hope that Nintendo doesn't like. I didn't mention they will, but I hope they don't like purge or like lock down a lot of their older stuff. Like, because preservation of this stuff is important, and it's fine that Nintendo does it internally. But I hope that they don't risk losing this stuff by like eliminating it from as many locations as they can, and like putting it all in one server that's then vulnerable or something like that.
Yeah, erasing history for fear of it being repeated at some point.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Oh, it's cool. It's especially interesting for a lot of us that have kind of lived through the development of these things in our childhood and often wondering, extra details back then that we finally learned about now. But it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know as well. Like some of these things I don't think we would have ever anticipated at all. So, yeah. All right. Well, cool. Well, that's a good smattering of news tonight, which leaves us with a good chunk of time just to wrap up with our main topic for tonight, which, given what we've been chatting about earlier this episode and recently too, we thought we'd just take a hot minute to chat a little bit about visual novels as a bit of a genre, because it's one that we haven't spent a lot of time really chatting about before, because not necessarily the biggest focus on them as like AAA games with big launch cycles and a lot of public attention and that sort of stuff. But Matt,
it's something that. Sorry, go on.
Oh, I was going to say Matt kind of sort of thought that given the timing, it might be an opportunity for us to sort of dig into them a bit more. So I was going to throw to whoever wanted to kick off, sort of with where we should begin on this one.
I'm actually really keen to hear Christian's opinion on this because, you probably have a lot more history with visual novels than I do. So
maybe not as much as you'd think. Like I was going to say, Luke said it's something that we haven't spent a lot of time talking about, but have any of us really spent a lot of time even playing visual novels? Like, I think I'm probably more familiar with a lot of visual novels because maybe like the Twitter crowd and the kind of people like podcasts and stuff I listen to. I'm more plugged into that weeb kind of world because a lot of them are Japanese. I mean, there's it has leaked more into the West, and there are quite a broad variety of them now. But certainly, Japan is kind of the heart of visual novels.
I stopped to think about it this morning, and I think that you raise a really good question. But my answer to that is I've actually played a lot more of them than I thought, especially when you consider like any games that have visual novel aspects in them in terms of some of their storytelling, very much following that kind of formula and presentation. And there's one that you and I will probably talk at length about with that we've talked a lot about recently. And the other thing that occurred to me is that if we were to expand that slightly to include text adventure games, which cover a lot of the same sort of ground, then yes, I've probably played a fuckload more than I would have expected. So
already we get into the problem that exists with every single genre of every kind of media, which is what is a visual novel. And I think that you can open it up too wide, like maybe including text adventures. So in the strictest sense of the form, you could say it's a novel that you click through on a video screen instead of reading in a book. But okay, we know that there's more to it than that because visual novels often have branching paths. They have choices, romance partners, that sort of thing. Which, unless you're doing a choose your own adventure book, you can't do.
Isn't it in the name? If it's called a visual novel, why would a text adventure be a visual novel?
Because the visuals available back then were more of your ASCII art style as opposed to what we're able to do these days. So it's very much
they weren't called visual novels back then. They were a different type of game.
Yeah, it's a product of its time, though. Like, I think that a lot of the mechanics in terms of the way that a story is presented as being like a reasonably linear path through that you experience, as opposed to having a lot of engaging gameplay elements where the element of choice is kind of like a core facet of the game, is something that sets it apart from other games genres. So I think it does have like a lineage there. I agree it's not the same thing, but I see it more of like an evolution path where, you know, we kind of had those text-based adventures which were very story-driven in the early days, which sort of grew up to become visual novels as we had the ability to, you know, have a lot more art assets in games, and, you know, the spend on character artists and that sort of thing became more commonplace, and it was no longer sort of just, you know, sprite models of things that, you know, were on a 2D backdrop sort of stuff. Yeah,
I might be wrong, but I feel like it's the terminology actually comes from comic books, where like especially long comic books were called visual novels. So like the original Watchmen was a visual novel.
It's a graphic novel, right? Is that what
it's a visual graphic novel? Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I think it might actually come from that.
I think it's like gameplay wise, like video game wise. I think that they tend to have almost no gameplay. So I think that's one of the key things, is that the narrative can be presented in a lot of different ways, and you can be making choices or that sort of thing. But as far as like gameplay goes, you're usually reading and then making choices, reading, making choices. You're not usually, you know, attacking or collecting or achieving, like that sort of thing. Adrian's falling asleep. But that's but do you think that's kind of fair to say that it's that's the novel part of it, is like reading and then making choices?
There's definitely games that push the boundaries of that though, and still maintain and capture the feel of a visual novel for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like with all genres, you can have elements of stuff in other games. It's like you can have a fighting game with RPG elements. You can have an open world sports game, probably. Like and so like I'm sure someone can do that.
That's called sport.
No, I mean like imagine like all the whole GTA map, but it's like soccer and there's like hidden goalposts hidden around. That'd be fun.
Sure.
You're under.
Rocket League, GTA Rocket League, open world Rocket League. Let's do that.
That would actually be pretty cool.
Yeah. But no, so like Persona, we're going to talk about, right? Like Persona, there's kind of like half of the game is visual novel and half the game is dungeon crawler JRPG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Like, and it's probably gotten more gamey in recent iterations than what I understand the earlier ones to be. Like, there probably was like a cleaner split in past Persona games to, like, Persona 5's a lot more gameplay, I would say, particularly when it comes to navigating around the real world when you're not in combat situations to actually locate characters and interact with them. There's that exists in the other games too, but there's even more of it in 5 to the point of it becomes an exploration mechanic as well. So... yeah, but the character interactions very much feel visual novel style in a lot of cases, and there's not a huge amount of choice in those dialogue interactions. There are at certain points when you're building relationships with your social links, but the choices usually have a fairly minor consequence. Like you usually end up on the same sort of narrative path regardless, except when you're choosing sort of relationship. Sort of, you know, if you want to partner up and you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend at different instances, it's kind of otherwise the same. So
Persona games tend to have 3 dialogue choices, like nice, mean, and like joke, or like wild card. But yeah, they outside of key moments, they don't tend to impact much. They're just like yeah. Sorry, and then there's stuff like you could even talk about Mass Effect, right? And like the dialogue system in Mass Effect and like making choices there. Is that visual novel-y?
No, because I enjoyed it.
Nice.
No, but seriously, I was like, it's so funny you should say Mass Effect, because as you guys were talking, I've played Persona 4, and I was like, I enjoyed most of Persona 4. Certainly more than the combat stuff. I enjoyed the main stuff. And then I thought, what other games have a lot of dialogue but I enjoyed? And I'm like, and I was thinking, if my camera box is the screen, if there's more than maybe that much dialogue on the screen, I kind of switch off. So like text logs, especially books, games that have books in them, I'm like, oh, fucking hell. Like, I didn't play a video game to read a book. Like, so in that same vein, I've never played a visual novel on purpose, and I don't think I will. And like nothing against Necrobarista, but I have no interest in playing Necrobarista, regardless of what it looks like or anything like that. I think like I'm just complaining about what I like now. There's no point in continuing.
I'm interested though, like because you've read books and you've done an audiobook recently. So like why specifically? Yeah.
I think it's just reading. It's the act of reading. Like I find too much of it is a turn-off, especially when I'm engaging with like a visual medium, and especially if I'm in the middle of doing something that involves three-dimensional space and moving around and interacting. To then have text in front of me is jarring and time-consuming and pulls me out of the action. I understand a visual novel is different because it's like that from the beginning. I think what it could possibly be is like I don't read a lot of books, and it's for the same reason that like when you're trying to get into a new TV series or something like that, where the hardest part is like getting through the initial like onboarding of a new world, a new narrative, etc. For the same reason I don't read a lot of books, I probably wouldn't play a lot of visual novels, because if it's not something I'm already interested in, it takes a while for me to warm up to it.
Yeah.
And if the way I have to warm up to it is by doing a lot of reading, that's another barrier for me to like get into the story. The audio novel I just listened to is because I was literally stuck on the road for like 9 hours a day. It kind of forced me to basically listen, and like that was a bit different because I didn't have to put in the effort of reading.
Yeah,
that's basically it.
I think that visual novels, almost like racing or sports games in a way, are quite a polarizing genre because they tend to have a very closed audience. People who play visual novels and like visual novels are usually the same people who will always engage with those games. It's very rare for someone to sort of not be into that medium and want to try it out, because I think most people understand, kind of what they're about. And one of the things that I think that the genre quite strongly suffers from is the fact that there is a high trash to value ratio when it comes to the stuff that's out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I would say that. The comparison to racing and sports game is a really good one because the fact that most of them are garbage, and that's visual novels as well. Like,
unfortunately,
And is that because it has like the lowest level of developer entry?
Well,
I think that's definitely something to do with it.
Yeah,
I've seen and spoken to people who like are baby step game devs, and they want to make visual novels because it has a low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're especially good for people who are into art and capable sort of visual artists, but maybe don't have a huge amount of programming or game design skill, and they decide to sort of get their feet wet by sort of designing a visual novel first because it plays to their strengths. And I think the other thing too is that even though there is a certain amount of skill required to have a aesthetically good looking visual novel, like having fantastical artwork to be able to draw characters that are appealing to the eye and full of character and that kind of stuff, they are, by the nature of their design, able to usually reuse a lot of their assets. So that makes it a lot easier for those people developing those games, I think, because you've got your static images, you can reuse a lot of the assets, you can put them in different combinations and sort of layer them on top of each other for different effects, but it's pretty easy compared to actually designing a dynamic model or something. Yeah.
The closest I think I've come to a visual novel is Telltale Games.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's probably the closest I've come.
I've got that in my note. I was going to ask, are the Telltale Games visual novels?
No, I think there's plenty of gameplay in those personally.
No, I don't think they are, because
I don't think they are either.
I played them and enjoyed them. So.
Yeah, there's quick time events as well.
Yeah.
Plus, not a lot of reading, really. It's acting.
No, you have subtitles, but you can easily get through with the spoken dialogue.
Yeah.
I think that what you're saying, Chris, Adrian, about like the too much reading thing. Like, I think a good visual novel actually avoids you doing a lot of reading. So like Necrobarista, like you do a lot of reading in Necrobarista, but it's not like paragraphs or chunky, big blocks of text that you would see in a novel, because that's what the visuals exist for, right? Like it doesn't need to describe the way a scene looks because you can see it.
Text in a visual novel should take up about this much space.
Yeah.
Like there.
Like
That should be it.
Down here. Anything more than that, and you're like, waste people's time.
Yeah.
But I mean, like Necrobarista, like you've got this section of the screen, like I'll do this, where it's like over here. And whenever you're reading like one of the logs in the world, where it's like that's the chunkiest text you'll find, it's in that kind of space. But the font is 30 point, like it's freaking huge.
But
it's like 5 pages.
I get what you're saying. The problem is that's all of the game, and that's the turn off. It's not even necessarily the individual volume of text. It's the fact that is the entire game, and like I say, if I'm playing something like what did I play recently where there were like tons of logs?
Subnautica.
Subnautica. Although that maybe is a bit different because I really enjoyed reading, but even then it turned me off a little. Dishonored is similar, where there's like lots of there's tons of reading. You're just picking up shit all over the place. Or Divinity, or like Skyrim, where there's just fucking books everywhere. And I'm like I came to kill dragons, not read books. And I know that's a real meathead kind of opinion. Like I get that. It's a very like dumb guy kind of attitude.
I never read a Skyrim book. Fuck that.
But here's the thing, though. Those games don't make it fun to read them.
Well,
they actively make it difficult, right? Like they actively, it's shit at it. It's bad at it.
Here's the fun comparison. Like compare that to, say, looking at all of the lore entries in Destiny 2. Like the game is not a visual novel by any stretch, and you certainly can find the task of reading through all that stuff quite arduous if that's not what you're into. But you don't need to do that to get the value out of the game. Like it's not a required component of the fun loop at all. Games where it is a required component, and a really good example that you fucking hated, Adrian, for this exact reason was Fallout 76, because in order to actually engage with some of the quests in that game and some of the storylines, you had to read fucking text entry screens.
Because there were no NPCs.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, and that was a soul draining activity that had no engaging value whatsoever. So I totally get what you mean. Yeah.
When it comes to open world games, I'm right alongside Adrian. I don't read any logs, computer terminals, fuck all that. But to me, like that's because that's like a tiny part that I can ignore in a big cool game. But with a visual novel, I'm fine with the reading because that's the experience I've paid for.
Yeah.
The last point for me personally when it comes to visual novels, and this again is like maybe just a stereotype and my own perception of them, is that they're all like, it's part of what you said about being trashy. It's kind of like a trashy, and specifically like weeb trash is all I think of when I think of visual novels.
Yeah.
I can't think of any like visual novel that appeals to me in genre or art style. That's what's going to hook me first. Like,
Adrian, have you ever played any of the Ace Attorney games?
No.
Okay. Because that's probably one of the standouts in terms of mainstream visual novels that a lot of people have probably engaged with. So.
Yeah, I think.
And I'm doing a thought exercise where I'm like, all right, let's pick something that I really love. Like, if there was a Transformers visual novel, would I read that? Probably. Like, now that I think about it, if there was a visual novel that was Transformers themed, I'd give that a go because it's something I like. But that, like, the theme has to draw me in first before I'm going to commit to that style of game.
I do want to say that I think that because visual novels lack gameplay, they rely on feelings, right? So they rely on character and feelings, and that's why a lot of visual novels are romance games. Like that's the bedrock of visual novel is romance, I think. Like in Japan, the otome games, like visual novels, romance novels intended for women, that's huge. That's like a $1 billion industry. Like romance visual novels for women, and that there's certainly a huge weeb aspect to that. Like a lot of them are weeb dating games, and you see like even some of the more popular ones that have been developed in the West, like what was the boyfriend one, the daddy one, Dream Daddy. Yeah, like Dream Daddy's it's still doing that thing. Like it's
my favorite game.
It's a romance game.
Dream Daddy's interesting though because it did have some minor gameplay elements in it to break up the storytelling a bit. Yeah.
And that's why I am announcing my visual novel called Mechromancer. That's about romancing anime mechs.
I am fucking for that.
Yeah, I can get on board with that, actually.
Yeah.
So you've got like a Gundam style, you've got like a skinny Ava style, you've got like a Transformer style, and you've got to choose which one you like, and then you romance them.
Do they have
we can get Damon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. It was funny playing through Necrobarista. Actually, put it into stark clarity for me as to some of the aspects of visual novels that have really turned me off in the past, and that for this game in particular didn't. Which is what made me appreciate it even more, because I'll definitely sort of go out and say that I mean, I've been on the record on this show specifically, like trashing the fuck out of visual novels in the past.
Like it was Hatoful Boyfriend.
Hatoful Boyfriend was one in particular, yeah. And there were really good reasons why I disliked that game. It wasn't just a sake of the theme being stupid and about dating birds and that kind of stuff. That was obviously part of it. But one of the things that I appreciated playing through Necrobarista is that it wasn't that tried and tired sort of format of having like a visual on screen and then another image of like the character who's speaking down below with their text bubble. Like everything was actually happening in the same frame, and there was movement designed to actually draw your eye to the text in different places. The way the text was presented in terms of the timing, the pacing, the amount of it on screen, the size of it, all that sort of stuff was actually done in a way that actually matched the movement and the dynamic sort of positioning of the characters as they told the story. It was very much not the sort of here's a template, let's just ram stuff into it and use that every single time we want to deliver a new line of the story. It was they used every part of that palette to paint the picture. Yeah.
You know what that makes me think of is that in recent years when you watch like a TV show or a drama and the character on screen gets a text message and it pops up like like on the TV screen. Yeah,
a bit like that. It also made me realize that one thing I really value when it comes to visual novels too is consistency in style. Like, I think that there's a lot of them out there that have, it's almost like two different artists have done the work and you can see immediately where the differences lie. It's almost like they've got like a background artist and a character portrait artist. And that's just really jarring to me when the two don't quite match. And I've actually had that real jarring feel playing through Persona 4. And I think this is probably a product of playing 5 first, because one of the things I hate that 4 does is that the 3D character models that you actually use on screen in all the combat sort of areas and to walk around different areas and that sort of stuff are a lot more sort of not 100%, but a lot more chibi in their appearance. Like these sort of, miniaturized versions of the characters, not the real life proportions. They don't look as realistic as what their character portraits do. So when you see those models on screen and then you see like the images of the characters that appear next to the text entries, the two don't match and it's quite jarring. When Persona 5 doesn't do that at all, like everything matches and it's a really consistent art style, and I really like that about that game, and it sort of strikes me as a key difference between the two that just doesn't jive with me when it comes to 4. So, and I appreciate that with games like Necrobarista, again, like the art style is consistent across everything. Like the background matches the characters, matches the lighting, matches everything that you're seeing. It's a very stylized. Sort of vista that all works together really, really well. So yeah, I like that kind of stuff.
I feel like good visual novels understand that they're still games and they still require a reward system. And so like Necrobarista, you progress in the story, and every visual scene is its kind of own reward because it's visually like incredibly pretty, and you're looking forward to like. What is the next camera angle we're going to get? What is the next punchline we're going to get? But I feel very sure that when they were designing that game, they were basically like, we want key scenes to be memeable. Like we want like the characters to be in certain poses. We want the text on screen to it has a black outline. It's white. It's chunky font. It exists in that space to be memed almost, right?
Yeah.
And so those sequences are kind of a reward for sitting through the narrative kind of leading up to that point, right? It makes for a great punchline.
It reminds me a little bit of how comics are drawn, in that often they'll have like these splash pages of like this really awesomely captured action scene, and then they kind of build some of the rest of the panels around that in a way. Like I'm sure that chronologically when they're sort of penning the comic, that's not necessarily how they design it, but in some cases, I'm sure they do, because it's a really cool, splashy way to have these awesome sort of highlight scenes and then sort of panel around it. So yeah,
it gets boring just to read. Okay, well, there's freaking square cell after square cell of character talking to another character.
Yeah.
Like there was a really great example I saw recently from one of the Spider-Man comics where it was like frames within the frames, and it kind of like indicated this movement, like they were walking forward through the frames. They were all stacked on top of each other. And it's like, that's freaking beautiful. Like, it's this gorgeous little reward for dealing with all the frames beforehand that were just your typical comic book frames. And you see a lot of that where, like, you have characters bursting out of frames and appearing on other frames, and like, literally quite literally breaking the fourth wall of the comic book. So yeah, like they kind of do have their own reward system there as well. But a lot of these other games that have adopted stuff from visual novels, like you go through the gameplay in Mass Effect, and you do all the freaking shooting and everything like that, and then the dialogue afterwards is a reward. Like, you get to interact with your like other teammates, you get to make decisions about how you talk to them. But then you deal with that stuff, and then you go back to the combat, and the combat's a reward for going through the dialogue. And so it's like this whole back and forth of just, you're progressing through one, and it's encouraging you to do the other. And so, like, I feel like that's almost like the simplest solution, which isn't to say that, it's superior to visual novels. It's just like another solution to the visual novel problem of how do you provide players with a reward for reading, almost,
Yeah, right. As I think for a lot of visual novel players, that's all they want. They just want the reading. They're not looking for anything else. That's what the genre exists for. Like Mass Effect, we can talk about, it has visual novel-esque elements in it, but it's the evolution of that comes from like RPGs, which comes from like D&D, and you'd have talking in D&D and then fighting in D&D. Whereas the visual novels come from like 80s, 90s Japan, floppy disk, like dating visual novel games. So yeah.
What about 100%. What about the aspect of voiceover in some visual novels? Are you guys for or against that with this genre?
I feel like it needs to be a choice. Like, why not? I know Necrobarista has Chinese actual dub. It's the only dub in the game. You can't actually get English dubs. And it's amazing. Like, it's actually really good. I don't understand a word of it, but it's actually quite impressively voice acted, right? Like, I quite like that. Would I play with it turned on? Maybe. Like, it depends on how good it was, but I don't know if it's necessary. I don't think it's bad either. I think it's an option.
I think that for me personally, a visual novel needs some like sound design. So it needs like usually music, and then often they'll have like Foley sounds. So like if like a book falls on someone's head, they'll have like a boom sort of noise.
Yeah.
Or the characters might have like bark, where it's just like short sounds, like the kind of sound. Yeah, like that sort of thing. Like they have those just to tie things together and give you a little bit of like audio clue as to the scene and the setting.
You know what I hate is when it hasn't been visual novels because I haven't played visual novels, but sometimes in like RPGs where like the character. Oh, that's right. It happens in Shantae all the time, where like the text will come up, and if it says like, "Oh really? I wasn't really thinking of blah blah blah," the voice acting will be, "Oh really?" And then like nothing else, and all they say is like the first couple of words,
super common
dialogue.
Yeah.
I was like, "That's shit. I hate that."
Just make a noise. I'm actually going to be firmer and say I don't like voice dialogue in visual novels. I think it's a detriment to them because the amount of like cost and effort it takes to fully voice a visual novel is immense. So I feel like you either have to have a huge budget or you make compromises in the breadth of your game. Like the visual novel writers should just have the freedom to write whatever the hell they want and not have to worry about hiring voice casts, doing like auditions, paying people, because that's just going to make things.
They can just hire us, the four of us. We'll do it.
It makes me think of Fallout 4, where they chose to voice the protagonist in Fallout 4, and like that ruined the RPG side of Fallout 4 for me, because just the like lack of immersion in having your character voiced, and I feel like it really damaged the breadth of the actual choices you got. Like it was much more limited in what you could actually say and what you could choose between.
I can actually totally respect that. That makes a lot of sense as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of divided on it. Like, for me, it's almost like the difference between reading a book and listening to an audiobook, because I will often prefer to read a book and not listen to an audiobook, because part of the act of reading a book for me is actually kind of interpretation in my own mind as I'm absorbing the content. Like I don't like necessarily a voice to kind of spell out to me how something sounds when I prefer to go through the mental exercise of kind of conjuring that myself in my mind. But given that a visual novel kind of already does part of that for you by sort of showing you the visuals of like the character art and the models and that sort of thing anyway, to me, like taking the next step and doing the audio maybe isn't that big a leap. But because it's not, the same as comparing something that's entirely text to something that isn't. But I don't know. Like I think that bad voiceover can easily ruin, as opposed to enhance. Like there's probably more risk. Yeah.
With an audiobook, for example, if you listen to an audiobook, you're listening to 100% of the recorded dialogue. Because if you play a visual novel, ideally you want to actually be listening to 10% of the voice dialogue because you want to feel like you're on your own path that's way divergent. You're making choices. And then there's a pressure, I think, as a dev, if you've made all this content, you want people to experience it.
There is one other mechanical aspect to it, which, I'm professionally a learning developer. Like I'll actually spend quite a bit of my day job actually designing sort of content for, instructional design for e-learning courses and that sort of stuff. And one of the hardest things to get right when you actually use audio and voiceover for any content that you're putting together is getting the pacing right and giving the control back to the person who's actually using the tool. So if someone wants to sort of, fire through something really rapidly because they can read a lot faster than somebody else, as soon as you introduce audio elements, it's a lot fucking harder to do that. And I think that is a detriment to having voiceover content because when you start skipping ahead, then it does really ruin the experience. So
it can be distracting when you're reading the dialogue at a different pace to the voice.
Totally.
Whenever I watch a freaking Unity tutorial on YouTube, I rant about this all the time. All the people that do Unity tutorials on YouTube speak like this.
Oh, God.
Then it's like, cool, okay, so I'm playing that at 1.5 times because that's actually a reasonable time to actually speak in. I 100% see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe if there was some like really obscene pornographic visual novel.
Dude,
Adrian, the porn industry is built on fucking visual novels, man.
Yeah. I actually wanted to bring up that visual novels, like, there are a lot of adult visual novels for sure, and I feel like there's been some cases where they've been like some visual novels have been taken off Steam, like banned from Steam, even though Steam claim to have this very open policy with games, and they do allow adult rating games on Steam now. There's like I have an issue with the inconsistency of how they enforce certain standards. Like there are some games that have like full nudity in them that get away with it because they're seen as being like having more artistic value or credit than a visual novel. Like I think that because visual novels are age.
Can you just let me know what these terrible games are so I can avoid them? Tell me the names of them and I'll just.
I mean, The Witcher 3, The Last of Us 2. I'm sure there's plenty more. But yeah, I think that visual novels get a bad rep for being for pervs a lot of the time, and I just object to the
As a perv, I take it.
As a perv,
the same thing.
It's just the inconsistent ruling on the ratings. I don't like.
Yeah. If you get a blacklist me, do it all the time. Damn it.
Yeah.
Oh, hilarious.
I've actually the only like pure visual novel I think I've played is Doki Doki Literature Club, and even that is like playing with the genre itself. Like I haven't played like a straight visual novel before.
Yeah.
Like I played like Danganronpa, which is like more Phoenix Wright, where you have like a court scene based side of it too. So there's more gameplay. You actually walk around and stuff. So yeah, I haven't like Persona, but that doesn't really count. So
I've watched a lot of porn. Does that
no?
It depends. Depends, Adrian. Did you freeze frame it a lot to the point where you were almost looking at a still image for the entire time, or
you're watching the porn with subtitles on?
Sometimes I do my own voiceovers.
Interesting. Yeah, like I haven't played a whole bunch of them either. I have played Dream Daddy. I have played Hatoful Boyfriend. Obviously, the biggest issue I had with Hatoful Boyfriend is that there was a lot of world building that existed for that game that you just didn't get unless you read content outside of it. And I just wasn't interested in that world because they kind of just expected you. There was an assumption that you knew what was going on when you jump in there, as opposed to why the fuck are these sort of androgynous birds talking? Like they don't actually go in and explain any of that stuff, and it just gives you this real kind of broken immersion. Effect to when you're trying to sort of absorb what's going on. It just didn't make sense at all. It's almost like we're doing this stupid kind of setting just for the sake of being edgy, as opposed to because it actually supported the tale that we're trying to tell. So, and I'm sure that there are people who are big fans of that game that would completely disagree. But for someone who is going to struggle to enjoy a visual novel from the get-go, that was a big sort of red flag to me in terms of enjoyment. But yeah, I don't know. There's not a lot of others that I've really had a lot of contact with. I know there's good ones out there that I've had recommended to me, but it's a tough genre to break into if you haven't experienced a lot of good ones, I feel.
It's 100% like a niche genre, and I think it's great. There's tons of little niche genres all over the place, and they don't exist in the same space as like AAA games, and that's fine. And not everybody needs to enjoy them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Visual novels. There you go. So, I mean, if anyone actually happens to know any good visual novels that would be worth recommending to us, that for a group of people like us that may not actually be that in tune with that particular genre, let us know anyway. We might find something that we think is actually okay.
I'm down for one. I've heard good things about. There's one called Katawa Shouju that it's quite old now, but I've heard fantastic things about that. And one called Steins Gate. I've watched the anime of Steins Gate, but the visual novel's apparently really good. So by year's end, I want to play one of those two games.
Okay, interesting. Steins Gate, and what was the first one you said?
Steins Gate, and it's called Katawa Shouju.
Katawa Shouju. Okay, cool.
I'll report back.
Yeah, all right. I mean, that's probably another point too. I think there's a lot of them that are way too long for what they are. So hopefully that's not the case with those two, and it doesn't take you an age to get through. Yeah. But yeah, if you've got a recommendation, obviously send it to us at the usual sort of places. So mail@partyloaded.com. You can link us on Twitter at partyloadedshow. Just check us out on Facebook. All the usual sort of haunts. You can send us a message and let us know your crazy visual novel that hopefully is not blacklisted porn somewhere. Or I'll just send those straight to Adrian, let's just face it.
That's when Adrian will read it.
Yeah.
Read it.
Yeah, read.
Absolutely. Well, at least if it's on screen, the screen's not going to stick to anything. Hopefully. Yeah. Anyway, between now and next episode, anyone got anything cool that you're looking forward to playing that's a bit off the reservation as far as what we've been doing lately?
Path.
Yeah. I was going to say beaten, but immediately stopped myself.
What's on the beaten path, all right?
Yeah. I'm going to pledge to playing some Tsushima. Ghost of Tsushima, cool. So we can talk a bit more about that.
Yeah. Tsushima.
Tsushima.
It's a sushi restaurant.
Yeah, I'm going to make my way through more Ghost.
Yeah.
I bought the Ring Fit Adventure.
Oh,
so I actually give it a shot.
Oh, nice, nice.
Back in stock around places now. Yep, in Australia,
pretty much.
Yeah,
in Australia, yeah. I've actually had it like pre-ordered for like 2 months, and it finally arrived just today.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah,
I actually bought that too just the other day.
Really?
Really?
But it's for someone else. It's who? Yeah, the birthday's coming up.
Yeah. Matt, there was something else you bought the other day as well. Before we wrap up, do you just want to quickly show it off if you've got it near you? The book that.
Oh yeah, shit! I do. I do have it right here.
Yeah.
Yes. I also have this to go with the Wii Fit thing.
To take the edge off.
Chicken on the front.
Matt, flip to a random recipe. I want to see what it is.
Yeah.
So
this is the Destiny 2 cookbook for the
what do we got? What is it?
Ajitsuke Tamago.
Tamago.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
There's some good stuff in here. I was actually reading through it. It's twice baked sweet potatoes.
Ooh.
That was really good.
That does sound good.
Yep.
And there's actually like
you put twice baked in front of anything and it's good.
It's like sweet potato that
you can go like twice baked egg.
Koreans love sweet potato. I've been eating a lot of sweet potato.
Yeah.
There's a spinach salad. There's actually Oh yeah, there we go. So like, there's actually more entry stuff in here. That actually like describes.
That sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Crimson Days.
Yeah.
No, that's actually
Crimson Glaze.
Oh,
Crimson Glaze.
No.
Did it say Glaze? Oh,
No,
I thought
No, it said
Days.
Crimson Days. The start of the book actually has a whole bunch of just different ingredients that you'll be using quite a lot of.
That's what our next live
Yeah.
stream. Our next live stream should be us cooking recipes out of that book.
Hey,
That'd be pretty cool.
I'm actually down for that. That'd be hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
bring the web camera over
But,
into my kitchen and
Matt.
have like a cooking show.
Did you pay for the seasoning pass?
The seasoning pass.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent.
Christian, you win tonight. That was good.
Yeah.
Look, okay, Bungie,
win.
you need to actually like get on that because that's a fucking great idea. Like every month you get a brand new seasoning.
That's solid.
Excellent.
I love it. All right. On that note, we're not going to get any better, so we'll leave it there. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Catch us again next week at the same time, so 8 p.m. Australian Western Standard Time, or GMT +8, depending on where in the world you are, on twitch.tv/partyload, where we'll be streaming some sort of fun game stuff. I think Matt and I have been talking about maybe doing some Halo sort of gameplay or whatever else takes our fancy, but check out our usual social media feeds to find out what is going on. So,
Destiny recipes.
yeah, all that.
Who knows?
I feel kind of like we have to make this happen now.
I'm down for that.
Awesome. All right, well, that's all for tonight. Thank you very much for listening. Until next time, we'll see you then. Good night.
Right.
Good night.
Bye.
The Party Loaded podcast is a Channel Endgame production. For this and more great gaming content, bookmark channelendgame.com.